Good afternoon and welcome.
I'm Darby Everhard, and Charles asked me to give a little invocation for this occasion today. So let us pray. God, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather together to mark this site and the significance of the Samuel and Sarah Stauber farm, and for the work that has been done in order for us to be here today. We thank you for the opportunity you have given us to be stewards of this earth and to produce food that nourishes your people. We thank you for this beautiful piece of farmland and your creation, and for its owners, past and present, and for those who will care for it in the future. We thank you for life-giving water and soil that nourish this farm and its crops and animals. Help those who are stewards of this farm to look in awe at the mysteries of your work not yet seen, and to appreciate the new life that continually springs forth. We thank you for the work and legacy of this farm and for its place in Forsyth County's 19th century history and in North Carolina. We ask your blessings on this place and on all those who will encounter its many gifts. Guide us with wisdom and knowledge on how to best care for this farm and how to use its resources for the common good. In your holy name, amen.
Good afternoon. Boy, what a beautiful day. Ooh, it's been great. On behalf of the Forsyth County Commissioners, I want to welcome all of you to this historic marker unveiling of the Samuel and Sarah Stauber farm, which is great. I live about 3 miles as a crow flies that way on Tobaccoville Road, and I have driven by this farm many times and really did not know its historical significance. I said, what an attractive farm. Look at these old, I can tell they're older buildings. So that was absolutely, it's great. So now when we have our marker unveiled, people driving by, there will be many, will be able to still slow down. Maybe they'll slow down. I was talking to Charles about the speed limit out here. But as they slow down, they'll have an opportunity maybe to read that. Maybe they'll slow down, and then maybe they'll come over and read it, and then they'll have that sense of kind of that sense of history when they drive by and take a look at it, which is great. We do have, I know we have City Council member John Larson here, and I'm pleased to see him. I don't see any of our other elected officials. I've kind of been keeping my eyes out. We do have Dudley Watts, who's our county manager, and April Johnson from the Historic Resources Commission said, either of you can say something when I'm finished. So you can think about it, if you want to. And John, by the way, we were talking that he has a little history with this project, so I'm sure he may want to certainly add to it. I do want to talk a little bit. The state of North Carolina provides sort of statutorily a lot of rules for counties. Counties must do these things and cities must do these things. And then they have a whole lot of things that are kind of permissive. If you want to do them, that's great. For example, it's not a statutory requirement that there be public libraries. But Forsyth County said about a little over 100 years ago, we're going to have a public library system, and so the county sponsors and supports public library system. And I think it's fortunate here in Forsyth County that our sort of city leaders and county leaders many years ago said it'd probably be a little more efficient and perhaps a little more consistent if we had some services and duties that were jointly managed. And you think about our joint city-county planning and zoning, pretty important activity. And you think about our utilities commission handling infrastructure for our county. And in their wisdom, they created an historical resources commission, the group here that is sponsoring this particular event. And in fact, I just you'll notice, I think on your card, your program here today, there are like 6 appointments from the city and 4 from the county, and 1 from the city of Kernersville and 1 from the village of Clemens. So we have kind of a very well represented cross section of our community to be on this commission. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all of them for their voluntary service. They commit a lot of hours and time to a lot of projects, one of the biggest of which is planning all the events in this month of May, which is Historic Preservation Month. So that's pretty special. And There are over 30 events planned. So, I want to, April staff, others, thank you for all the work that you do. And this may be the first one in May, if I remember right, but there are several. I have the calendar of events in May, and there are a lot of them. So that's really great. I think historic preservation, I was just kind of thinking about as it kind of blends with our history and community and context. And I thought there's two big issues, community. Community is a big part of why there are values to the community. And not least of which certainly is the sort of economic vitality piece and really community pride. There's a lot about community pride. And if you think about tourism, increasing tourism, clearly is connected to economic development. And why do people want to go to things? They want to go find out about what happened in the past. They want to know how people live. They want to know, gosh, did people really do things like that? And it's kind of like if you touch something that's 200 years ago, there were people in this. I went to the boys' school at Old Salem, dedication, and as that gets started, that's where little kids were. That's where the first formal education started in this county. So that's pretty special kind of feelings that go with that. So there's a lot of community stuff. We revitalize neighborhoods. Neighborhoods get revitalized. Downtowns get revitalized. And when people come looking to locate a business here or just to move here, that kind of puts our best foot forward. Our historic preservation, what do we think about our community and the value of preservation, the value of posterity, of maintaining for posterity. So as we think about a little more personally, we get that historical sort of context, that we have a personal historical context of where are we in the scheme, the timeline of the past and the future, and here we are. And we begin to sometimes just, I don't know if you do, ask yourself questions and think about it. I was thinking today, driving by Old Plank Road, because I've stopped and read that marker about, right down the road here in Bethania. Here it is where people, planks that kind of get the mud out and hopefully you get your wagon wheels over it, and that's pretty special to think about it. So now we have, here we have, I was just thinking how remarkable it is. We have a farm that was very active and successful back in the 1860s. It was thriving and started even earlier than that. And then to think of all the generations who have maintained this as a working farm and preserved this history and prosperity. And I want to acknowledge and thank Mr. Charles Taft here, who you'll hear from later, for all of his family efforts, and got here a little early, able to walk through his beautiful garden that he said he worked on a little each year for the last 25 years. And I said, a little? You worked a lot in maintaining that beautiful garden. So this is a special day, and we have some great speakers today. We're going to hear immediately Ms. Thacker, and she's going to actually talk particularly about I asked her if she would mind for me to recognize the other Human Resources Commission members who are here, and I'm looking forward to learn more about the Samuel and Sarah Stauber farm. So thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you. Oh, and John. Oh, okay.
You did that so well off the cuff, but I have the attention span of one of those hens, so I'm going to refer to my notes, okay? Welcome to the historic Stauber Farm. I'm Tina Thacker. I'm a member of the Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission, and on behalf of the commission and my fellow commissioner, David Hooser here, we welcome you all and appreciate your attendance today. The Historic Marker Program began a little more than 10 years ago, and since its inception, we've managed to place about 40 markers throughout the city and the county. Historic markers help us remember and learn about important places, events, and people in the community's collective history. They mark a spot in history that should be remembered. We are here today to learn about the Samuel and Sarah Stauber Farm, which got its early start in the 1850s by a Moravian family living near Bethania. We invite those of you who have stories or knowledge about this historic farm to come up one by one and share it with us if you'd like. We will start with Ms. Gwynne Taylor, who is a historic preservation consultant. Ms. Taylor?
Ooh, that was nice. Yeah. Good afternoon. Historic preservation really wouldn't be effective if the things that are being preserved didn't have a useful life. So you have to have a vision when you start to think you want to preserve something to see how it's going to be sustainable and how it's going to have a useful life. Charles and Lamar Taft had this vision, and you can see it's absolutely come to fruition. And I just want to say that I know that Lamar is smiling down on us today on this beautiful day, and just wanted to make sure we all remembered her wonderful smile today. So let's imagine this place in 1852, because that's when Sarah and Samuel Stauber moved in across the street. And really, the only thing we'd have to do is take away the asphalt on the road, take down the power lines, and there's not a whole lot that might be too different than 1852. As Tina said, their house actually reflects their Moravian heritage, but more so that of something called the Greek Revival style, which was very important. The Moravian heritage part, you can see, you won't see the chimneys on the outside of the house, they're actually on the inside, and the fireplaces inside are in the corners, and that's a Germanic trait. They came from a country that was cold. It was more efficient if you had the chimneys on the inside. So that was the Moravian part. The rest of it's pretty much a Greek Revival Southern thing, which really tells you that at this point in time in the 1850s, the Moravians were starting to be less German and more just Southern. So that kind of gives you something about the house itself. The 1860 census was really interesting. Samuel Stauber was 53. His wife Sarah was 60. Yes, that's right. She was 7 years older than Samuel. 2 of their 6 children were still living here with them on the farm. And they, at this point, Samuel had 800 acres. This was a huge farm for Forsyth County. In the 1860s, the average farm in Forsyth County was less than 200 acres. So you can see the magnitude of that. He had chickens, he had sheep, he had horses, he had cows, he grew wheat, corn, and oats. We know so much from the 1860 census. It did not grow tobacco, interestingly enough. That really wasn't a big crop in Forsyth County until later on. But we also need to remember that part of the reason that this place is so special is the outbuildings. The house is wonderful, but the fact that it comes with outbuildings from the same period as the house that have survived is truly amazing, and is part of the reason that it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1987. So we also need to remember, if we're using our imagination to think that we're back in the 1860s, we're also going to see African Americans here as well. In the 1860 census, the Staubers had 1, quote, white laborer and 8 slaves. The house to the left of the main house is possibly a slave cabin. There's that local tradition says that. And somewhere under the ground where we are now, there's possibly a foundation of another slave dwelling. So it was a typical farm in the 1860s for a very prosperous farmer. Most of Forsyth County was not the same. So now that we're 165 years after Samuel and Sarah, the chickens are still there. The roosters are crowing. There are sheep somewhere, I'm sure, grazing out here. And I think we can say that the vision of Charles and Lamar Taft to make it sustainable has been met, has come to fruition, and we can eat Stauber Farm eggs. We can eat Stauber Farm lamb. We can have lettuce from the Stauber Farm at some of the finest restaurants in Forsyth County. So it is a wonderful working farm again. So I hope that the presence of this marker will alert others that this place matters and that we hope it's safe for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Taylor. Next up, Charles Taft, the owner of the Stauber Farm. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to add that in addition to the historic preservation of the structures and the architecture, I became interested in preservation of endangered breeds of livestock, and I was a member of the am a member of the Livestock Conservancy, which, interestingly enough, is a nationwide organization whose home office is located down in Pittsburgh. And the breeds of animals that we have here, these are Delaware chickens. They are a threatened breed of heritage chickens. Behind you are some Araucana chickens that lay the blue egg. And over here is the Buckeye chickens. And all of these are threatened breeds of chickens. And so we're not only preserving architecture, but we're preserving breeds of animals. The St. Croix sheep that you see over in the east pasture are an endangered breed. It's a hair sheep, which is one reason I got interested in them. Means I don't have to shear them, because shearing sheep is hard work. But at any rate, there are less than 1,000 of these animals registered each year by the 50 or 60 breeders around the country. And there's less than 5,000 of these animals in the United States, and I've got roughly 50 of them here. So enjoy the animals while you're here. And this morning was rereading the historic nomination that Gwynne had done back in 1987. And I see here that in the 1860 census, Mr. Stauber had 10 horses, he had 10 milk cows, he had 15 cattle, 14 sheep, and 60 swine. So interestingly enough, though, there was no tobacco grown here, and but he was an active farmer. And the historic significance of this place is that there were about 10 farms in Forsyth County that were over 600 acres. His farm was about 800 acres. 200 acres of it were cleared. And this is the historic significance of this place, is that this is the only one of those 10 large farms in Forsyth County that still have the house and the outbuildings on the same foundation. So that's why it's historically significant. April Johnson asked me about a month ago when we were planning this if there were any neighbors in the area that had any recollections that they might like to share. And Eula Gray Long, my dear friend, who lives over on what was part of the original 800 acres, she made a comment to me this morning when we were talking. She says, you know, you and I are probably the only people alive that ever really lived in that house. And so I want to ask Eula Gray to come forward, or can I take the microphone to her? Eula Gray, can you come up and kind of tell us what your recollection is of what your relationship with the farm was whenever?
Well, I was ashore, but my grandmother, Sarah,
Get a little closer.
married ashore the first time. He died during the Civil War, and then she married Mr. Stauber. So back in about 1937, we moved in. I started to school when I lived in this house over here. And I think the Tuckers owned it at that time. I'm not sure. But I don't think there's about 4 families that have owned it. That was the Staubers, the Everetts, the Tuckers, and then you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the people that have ever owned it. And I think all the people wanted to take care of it. I can remember when the Tuckers owned it, we lived in the big house, but they came out and stayed in the little house some, and holidays and things. And I remember they took me over there to string popcorn for the Christmas tree, and that's the first time I'd ever put, because they didn't believe in putting anything bought. Everything had to be made that went on that Christmas tree, and they wanted to keep it as near like it was as they could. And they really, I think the Tuckers really wanted to take care of it. But I enjoyed living there. I told him this morning I could tell him a bad thing I did.
We want to hear the bad thing.
I didn't, I was little then and didn't like to eat too much. I didn't have too good an appetite, so my mother packed my lunch for me to take to school. Well, that house has a hall, you know, that goes all the way through from the front door out the back. And my mother had a big chest at the back of that hall there by that door. And one day she was cleaning and she pulled that chest out, and there was all my lunches she'd packed where I'd stuffed them behind the chest. And I can tell you one other thing. Now, he talked about the sheep and the chickens and everything, and we had a family that lived in Bethania, older man named Mr. Lehman, and he always wanted me to ride home from church with him, and I did. And one Sunday, we came home. My dad and mother had came home earlier, and when he let me out, my dad called and told me to come over here in the barn lot. And there was a tree right up there that was hollow at the bottom. And in that tree was a little goat, so there's been other animals out here besides sheep. Thank you.
Nancy, do you have any comments to make? Nancy's my neighbor over here, and her husband, Jimmy, has been my solid neighbor for many years, and Jimmy usually calls me when one of my animals is out to tell me that there's a problem, and so he saved me, and so many a time. But I expect Jimmy's great-great-grandparents probably were part of the division of the farm, since they are my next-door neighbors still. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I had. What we'll do here after we have the unveiling, I thought while everybody's here in the barnyard, we'll walk over to the barn, and you can look whether we've opened the doors, and you're welcome to walk through. You'll see some of the old pegs and the original construction. We've done 2 renovations of this barn over the years, and so hopefully it's in good enough shape to last for a couple of more generations to enjoy. And if you're interested in going over and getting a little up close and personal with some of the chickens, you're welcome to do that. And then after that, we'll meander across the street, and you can go through the gardens and go through the first floor of the house. And I'll turn it over to the program chairman for the unveiling.
Okay, I actually have one fond memory of the Stauber farm from recent years. And I was on the Wachovia Historical Society tour. And unlike today, I wasn't going anywhere after the event, so I was properly dressed for farm. And we're all on the bus and suddenly said, "Oh no, there's a lamb caught in the fence." And there was indeed a little lamb wound up in the fence. I had my boots on. I am from Texas, and I knew what to do. So I went out there and tromped across your field, sir, without your knowledge, and I freed your lamb. So if nobody else has any remarks to make, everyone who has participated in preparing for this event today, I would like for you to come up here so we can unveil the marker.